Brought to you by Ford, the best in Texas. Joining us now is the owner and general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, the great Jerry Jones. Good morning, Jerry. How we doing today?
Hey, well, we're doing great, and we're right in the middle of our just consideration. I'm not going to say evaluation because we've done our evaluation, but our consideration of how we're going to make these cuts, which is always important to say the least, but more importantly, a tough day because you've got a lot of guys that have really laid it on the line, not only for us now in training camp, but you think careers. There's a lot that goes through everybody's mind when you're basically cutting this thing down. So got a lot of young guys out here that probably will not make our roster, but ultimately be players in the NFL.
Well, Jerry, this is maybe the deepest roster you guys have had in a long time, but obviously what most people are talking about is Zeke, and you had some really interesting comments last night about you guys expect Ezekiel Elliott to miss some games, but not all the games. Wondering if you could expand on that. Why do you expect him to miss games, and why do you think he's definitely going to be here at some point?
Well, the collective bargaining agreement has obviously caveats to it, and one of them is that after a certain number of games, you start totaling everything, and things just start going forward and forward. And so, unique to the rules, if he comes in at a certain point in mid-season, or he does not come in, then it would basically just take everything contractually that he is and roll it another year forward. So nothing's been gained on his part. So it's unlikely that in any way Zeke wouldn't play. From our perspective, after you get on into the season a little bit, we've got the majority of the season left, the playoffs left, and then any player that would come in, you'd expect them to be able to get in shape and be fresh and be quite an asset to the team.
Jerry, how does this compare to Emmett's holdout in 1993?
Well, Emmett made that clear, I thought, last night in that broadcast. He was out of contract. He wasn't holding out with an existing contract. Big difference. Big difference.
Well,
the being free to negotiate is what not having a contract is about.
The Cowboys folklore says that the story goes that Charles Haley threw a helmet at you, and then that led to Emmett being signed. Is that true?
Well, he certainly did, but I think Emmett would be the first to tell you. Emmett certainly felt that he needed. He was so important to the team, and he was. That he should have the type of money that were being paid quarterbacks or being paid the top players. And we had offered him top running back money, and we settled on the top running back money.
Talking to Jerry Jones here on the Ben and Skin Show, 105.3 The Fan. So you understand all the conversations that are going on about your team right now, and y'all went into training camp with three guys that you were quote-unquote negotiating with, and Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott, and Ezekiel Elliott. And you know all the fan conversation and media conversation. A lot of people are equating Dak's situation to Zeke's situation. Is their situation similar in your mind?
Not really, no. Amari Cooper and Dak are very engaged with what we're doing this week and getting ready to play this Giants, and their contract status won't have any bearing on what we do against the Giants or this year. So much different. We only have one player that is out that's under contract. Now, there's a lot of players that we don't have on this team, but we don't have them on the contract. They're not under contract for us. And so, it's a completely different situation. And, again, not a lot to say here. The facts are that this game is about availability, sometimes more than ability. Availability. And one thing for sure, no one does anybody any good, themselves or the team, if they're not available. And there's many reasons to not be available, and I don't want to get elementary here, but one of them is just to not come in and play if you have a contract, and so the game and the season and life, if you will, goes on.
Jerry, I want to ask this in full respect. Last night I thought you had a fantastic interview after the game speaking to the media. But you were talking about how and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but my takeaway was that you were saying that expectations don't really change without Zeke, but then you could take from that, okay, I think he's implying that you don't need a highly paid running back then. If expectations don't change without Zeke, then do you really need that expense? And I know you can walk us through kind of those two things, right? How do we reconcile those two things together?
Well, Zeke is an outstanding player, and arguably right there with our best players. But no one gives up in any way, especially with the talented group that we have and the basic uniqueness of our age as a whole, as a team. No one, without one player, believes that that's terminal as far as us having a great year. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. Don't tell Jason Witten that if somebody gets hurt or somebody gets suspended, that our chances of winning a Super Bowl have gone. That's just not the case, and it is not the case. For instance, back when Emmett held out, and by the way, I just got to say this, he's one of the best friends I've got, and we've had a career long for me. I'm talking about my career with the Cowboys. I've had a continued relationship with him and his family and with Pat forever. So that's the way this thing goes. But the point is, Emmett was the first running back to ever play on a Super Bowl winning team. So most of these teams win Super Bowls without rushing champions. And secondly, we've had Zach now going on 3 or 4 years, and we haven't won it yet. And so we've got to figure out that obviously he's not the ingredient that will win it. And so you've got to think like that. You've got to play like that. That's why this game with so many players that it requires to play a game, offense, defense, special teams, and go through the entire game. And with the limited number of snaps that player gets on defense, sometimes 20 snaps for a lineman is what you see. So you look at all of that. It's availability, and one player just can't make the difference. They can make a difference, but not the difference.
Okay, well then, Jerry, there's a lot of things that we can infer from what you've said, but one of the things I think I've heard you guys say, have y'all made your quote-unquote final offer to Zeke? Is this, hey, this is what the offer is, come play or don't?
Yeah, we don't ever get into the conversation or negotiation with anything around here, and let's just put it like this. We're where we are, and I'd expect us to be lining up against the Giants without Zeke.
You know, last night I thought you were very eloquent when you were talking about this idea that you negotiate with players, and you very, very sternly said, no, I don't do that, but I'm the architect of this thing, and I like to talk to the players about my vision for things. What would you say to Ezekiel Elliott right now if you could visit with him personally?
Well, I wouldn't say anything here. The point is that when I do talk with players, it is important that they at least hear me say the overall picture for the Dallas Cowboys. And that is not a negotiation. I really am talking about how it is and how it needs to be. And we've counted on when we make contracts with all the other players on the team, and some of those have been made 2 and 3 years earlier. But all of it has to have a foundation of depending on your contracts. You have to, in measuring how much you have at any given time, any given month, any given year, you look at the makeup of all the contracts. Well, if all of a sudden everybody starts walking contracts, you have no basis of getting anything in an organized way. If they're moving out as fast as you put them on, then you can't plan anything. And so that's why when I say there's not a negotiation going on when I visit with players, I'm just explaining how it's going to be.
Talking to Jerry Jones here on the Ben and Skin Show, brought to you by Ford, the best in Texas. So, Jerry, there was some great conversation last night about the direction you guys are going with Kellen. As we sit here and talk about Zeke and Zeke not being here, I think it's a logical deduction to go, well, that's really going to hurt their offense because they've given the ball to Zeke so much and so much. Do you guys envision, both with or without Zeke, that this offense is going to be way different under Kellen Moore?
Yeah, I've heard criticism that we rely on, because Zeke is as talented as it is, that our offense is too oriented toward Zeke. And when you shut that down, which it does get shut down, then we're not as ready as we could be to exploit the other part of the defense that you have to give up to shut Zeke down. Well, now then, this has been through training camp and is an excellent time. We must execute our offense in a way that doesn't have that feature as much. And that's what's happening. And that'll be good for this team. That'll be good for this team when Zeke gets back. Teams will see that. They'll know that. And they know they have to account for what's out there when Zeke doesn't have the ball.
You know, there's a lot of talk about, hey, when Zeke gets here, and, that it makes sense. We've talked about this financially, why he wouldn't sit out the whole year. What guarantees are there that if you have a stalemate and Zeke does report at some point that it is full power, great attitude, Zeke, I'm ready to help carry the team?
Well, I'll ask another question for you. If we do a contract, what's to assure us that this time next year or 3 months later, we won't be talking about another contract if we're not going to honor a contract?
Is that the way that you guys feel the tone is right now, that you have a player that's not?
There's no tone. I'm just saying, if you have no basis to have a piece of paper, there's nothing that says a contract executed within the last few weeks or months can't be looked at and say, I think I want a different part of it done this way and not play. You get into a different world when you don't honor your agreements.
Right. And hey, I want to ask you about this. Marshall Faulk's been in the news a lot with a lot of comments. He commented on Jalen Smith's deal, on Dak's deal. Then he was there working out with Zeke and Cabo. And we're trying to understand, is he a part of Rocky Arsenault's agency? What is Marshall Faulk's involvement in all of this from your perspective?
I really have not kept up. I like Marshall, and he's been good for the NFL. And I got too much to do than be thinking about anything that these guys are commenting about this contract.
Yeah, you should block him on Twitter, Jerry. Ben and Skin Show, 105.3 The Fan. We got Jerry Jones rolling with us. There's so many different great things to get into here, Jerry. But are we concerned at all about the health of this offensive line? I know you're a good rookie. There was a setback with him. If you could kind of expand on that. And Zach has missed games and Tyron's missed games. How are we on the health of these guys?
Well, I feel real good about all of our starters. And as you've heard me say, our depth is outstanding. It's unfortunate that McGovern, who we had planned to really develop, that he hasn't been available to do that. And then when we got out here earlier this week, he had a setback in his pec injury. And he'll probably have a hour of some basis that gives him time in the early part of this season to get that pec in better shape. So the bottom line is that our plan to have him work as a lot of guard center position flex will have to go to plan B, but we have some outstanding players, and that's the point. We have the depth to make that adjustment and not be compromised. So we like McGovern as a player. He's got, we think, a great future. But fortunately, we don't have to have him because of that depth.
Yeah, you guys do have a lot of depth and all over the place, in addition to the offensive line, the defensive line. And so a lot of people want to know, has Taco Charlton made this roster?
Well, yes. Yes, and he's frankly had a great camp. I've been told all my life, been operating with the premise that you don't ever dismiss a guy that's got the qualities that a player like Taco has. You don't ever pass judgment completely on those guys until they've at least had 3 years. Now, that seems like a lot of rope, a lot of leeway, but he does some things really well, and he's capable of doing other things really well. And it's that part, do the other things really well, that would make him the player we wanted to have when we drafted him with the number 1 pick.
And finally, Mr. Jones, before we let you go on your way, and we're grateful for the time this morning, people are asking this, hey, you guys might have caught Jerry in the middle of breakfast or something there, and I'm just curious, what is your ideal breakfast? Give us your go-to breakfast if you can have whatever you want.
Well, I was hoping it wasn't so obvious, but actually, I had them set a little plate of eggs in this room. I'm in the personnel meeting that we're having going over our decisions this morning, and I got here real early, and so I thought I'd take the time to be out of that meeting to graze a little bit, and I think you've caught me.
Oh, no, and now it's fine. He's barely noticeable, but we love listening to you talk about hot dogs, and we love listening to you talk about food. So if you weren't speed eating, what is the best breakfast you could possibly have?
Well, I'm sitting here looking at some of it, and I've eaten some of it, but it's scrambled eggs stirred in the drippings of sausage.
Wow.
The sausage and the scrambled eggs at the same time. So you can tell life's rough for me. Talking to you guys, talking about the Cowboys, excited about the future. They're all ahead of us. I can sit here and roll my eyes back and picture a big-time winning season and all of the excitement of getting in the playoffs. I can dream about it all this morning as I eat these eggs.
Tell you what, if you guys go win the Super Bowl, let's go have a big party and enjoy some comfort food and some drippings together. Okay, Jerry?
Thank you, guys. All right.
Yeah.
Talk to you next week, man.
And, we apologize to Jerry or the Cowboys if we kept him long there. But, hey, we were super excited. We had a lot to talk about. That's on us, though.